Well, hello and welcome. You're listening to House to Home, a podcast of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. I'm Joseph Kohm, the Policy Director at FPAF, and I'm joined as always by my co-host from the FPAF team, Grace Youngson. Today, we're talking about an important story for parental rights and for protecting children online, which is the good news, in our opinion, that the Utah State Legislature passed on Wednesday, March 5th, the very first App Store Accountability Act. So this is big news, Grace. I think we have a lot to talk about for how it protects children and families. But why don't you take us through just the general story of what of the passage?
Yeah, so we want to credit AP for their reporting on this. But yes, Utah actually became the first state to pass this act, which protects children in the App Store from being able to download apps that they shouldn't have access to because they're minors, and not being able to enter into that agreement because when you're downloading an app and you're signing the terms and conditions, you're actually entering a contract. And so this bill prevents minors from doing that. They would have to have parental consent, which then, you know, makes it possible for parents to be fully aware and in control of what their kids are being exposed to. And so we're super happy to see this take place. And again, we want to credit AP for their reporting. And also, we we're especially excited about this because we're actually part of the Digital Childhood Alliance. And we've partnered with Melissa McKay as a National Coalition Allied expert. And so um, let's take a quick look at a video that was shared that explains a little bit more about this.
This bill is really a legal contracts and transparency bill. Every time you download an app, you're entering into a terms of service agreement. And, it allows developers to access kids' microphones, their exact location, so much sensitive data. So we just believe that parents need to be involved when, kids are signing contracts. Kids really don't sign contracts or are encouraged to sign contracts anywhere else but in the App Store.
Wow. Joseph, I want to open it up to you for your first thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. I mean, first of all, great job to Melissa. What a great allied expert she is, and just a champion for kids. And we're proud to be in alliance with her and many other national experts and allied organizations in the Digital Childhood Alliance. So my first reaction to this story, Grace, is actually that as a lawyer, I'm the lawyer on FPAF's team, and from a legal perspective, this bill seems like really a common sense measure to me because I think it's most people acknowledge that children being under the age of majority can't legally consent to contracts. Yet that is what happens every time any user goes and downloads an app from an app store on an operating
Mhm.
system. So if you're on your iPad or your iPhone, you go to the app store and you press the get button or the download button on an app, you're agreeing to a contract with that developer
Mhm.
that this is what we hear, quote unquote, the terms and conditions or the terms of service. That's what you're agreeing to, and children can't legally agree to that. So this
Mhm.
seems like a common sense protection for them from entering into legal agreements that they can't consent to.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think really it comes back to everything in life. Not all apps, not all content should be available to children. And in an arena that is so crazy, anyone can make an app, anyone can put something out there. We have to have some kinds of safeguards to protect children. And so I'm so happy to see this starting to happen.
Yeah, that's well said. We need these safeguards because app stores really are the wild west right now. There's really not any accountability, which is where I love. This is one of those examples where the name of the law actually does reflect what the law does. The App Store Accountability Act. There's no accountability for app stores right now. It can be a very dangerous place. It can be a very good place, a very productive place. I think, like all pieces of technology, Grace, it's a moral neutral. What matters is how you use it, how you steward it,
Yes.
and how you establish some protections and accountability for it. And that's what this law does right now because it requires age verification technology to be used to verify that that the downloading user is actually an adult. And if the user is not an adult, to actually get parental permission to initiate the download. And I want to assure our users that age verification technology is a newer piece of technology, but
Mhm.
it is a very safe and effective piece of technology. It's very different from facial age recognition because that ties your image to your actual identity. but age verification uses a technology called age estimation. And what that does is it simply looks at the features of any face without tying it to any specific identifying data. And it simply determines, is this the face of a person who is over 18 or not? And it does this with over 99% accuracy. That's
Wow.
one way age verification uses it. It's the most impressive and the safest, in my opinion. But there are other very safe industry standard ways to verify a user's age. I think the best ways to do it are with some kind of facial age estimation. So that's the technology we're talking about here. This is not about giving your data to the government. And in fact, there's even a legal imperative against the age verifying software company to not retain any data it uses to verify your age because they could get sued for it. And they have
Mhm.
a business incentive to do that because they're competing for contracts. So this is a safe piece of technology. And through this law, it's being leveraged very well to protect kids on app stores and ensure that they have a safe experience online.
Yes, I'm so glad that you took some time to actually explain how this works and reassure parents about, the safety of all of this. And so, I think what's interesting is some of the statistics we see surrounding this. We're not making a big deal out of this. This is a big issue. A third of children actually lie about their age online, which is huge. I even remember growing up and I had friends who wanted Facebook. And I remember at the time, I think you had to be 13 years old to get Facebook. I was like 10 years old at the time. I didn't have social media until I was much older, but they were all just it was so easy. You just had to say you were born in the 1990s or whatever it is, and you're in. You're into Facebook. And a lot of my friends did that. And so I think it's all too easy for kids to access things. And as parents and as adults, we have the responsibility of making sure that they are protected because kids are curious. This is why when you have young kids, you don't just like let them wander around outside by themselves because you know that it's probably not going to lead to anything good. You protect them, and this is exactly the same thing. It's like they're wandering around in the online world with zero kind of guidance and protections. And so, I think something else you brought up is anyone can create an app and they are actually the ones who set the age limit on it. So if you have predators, they're obviously not going to set an age limit on that app if they're trying to, capture young kids. And so we have to wisen up to this and recognize that these measures are extremely necessary.
To piggyback on that, Grace, you're right. This does, without this kind of accountability, it does expose children to predators online through dangerous apps or social media. But even in a more anodyne sense, even if an app developer isn't specifically trying to prey on kids for nefarious or criminal activities, what they are definitely trying to do is suit their marketing algorithm to specifically reach underage kids as part of their business model. And so because apps within app stores, their age ratings are assigned by self-reporting of the app's developers themselves. That's a disincentive to them for rating these apps as above 18 or only safe for adults because they're structuring these apps to appeal to children, to hook them into an addictive cycle. So what the app store does is it helps resolve that issue. Is if we can't get the developers to properly age rate the apps, then let's age gate the entire app store, which I think is much, much safer and provides a much more clean cut, elegant solution to this. Because as you said, parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children. But if kids are given free reign and access to the internet without parental involvement or even notification, it can be a very dangerous place. Kids' curiosity is a good thing. Their innocent curiosity, I see even in my little nephews, is so sweet and it's so good because it's going to lead to their good education someday and their ability to work hard. But we want to put safeguards on that. Parents can't do that unless they're able to consent to their kids on the app stores. And a bill like this will achieve that.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. I know as well something else to highlight is that Apple's App Store actually rated more than 200 dangerous apps as safe for kids. And so, this really is extremely needed, and also, I think when we fail to put these safeguards in place and we say, oh, it's not a big deal, we're actually misleading parents and families. And we're doing a complete disservice to, informing parents and helping parents in being able to bring up their children in the way that is safest and the way that they want to, which any parent wants their child to be brought up nurtured and loved and, not exposed to harmful things. And so as we this isn't just about the children, this is about also making sure that we properly assist parents in that. Um,
Mhm.
and I think on a more serious level, most children are exposed to porn between the ages of 7 and 13. And actually, most people's worldview is formed by the age of 13. So this is not something that is a game in any way, shape, or form. This is extremely important from a biblical perspective, from a discipleship perspective, as followers of Jesus, as followers of the Great Commission. This is part of uh, our responsibility because children are either going to see one side or the other. They're either going to see good, which is God, or they're going to see evil. And as our part of our responsibility as believers is to make sure that we're protecting kids from this evil.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Grace. I want to take it even one step further for the sake of our audiences. Most kids, like you said, are exposed to pornography for the first time between 7 and 13. We know from research that that usually happens online, and we know also that most kids find that out or stumble into this exposure unintentionally through anodyne
Mhm.
places on the internet. And finally, we also know from research that when kids see pornography online, they believe that that's actually what sex is. So if you're talking about worldview formation, by the age of 13, their worldview, their perspective on what sex is and ought to be is being shaped by pornography, absent any kind of serious age verification or other protections somewhere along the process. And what this bill does is it protects them upstream because a lot of those unintentional exposures happen within social
Mhm.
media apps. So, for example, in the app Snapchat, really popular app for young people, Pornhub, the world's largest supplier of porn, can be only 2 taps away in Snapchat. A child merely has to open a snap, click on the link within that snap, and suddenly you're into Pornhub. And that's because filters that a lot of parents use on kids' devices don't apply within these apps. So once you
Mhm.
get into the apps themselves, it becomes very, very murky and very hard to deal with. Something like the App Store Accountability app can help not just with this porn issue, but with other problems that kids experience online, particularly on social media upstream. I mean, let's face it, after COVID, the debate over whether social media is harmful to kids or not is over. There is no way to reasonably argue that it's safe for kids anymore. Doesn't mean kids shouldn't be on it entirely, but it means there needs to be safeguards and there needs to be parental involvement. So by age verifying users before they even download the apps, you're tackling this problem upstream in a very legally elegant way. And I think that's worthy of our lauding. So I'm glad you said that about the worldview because that's the far-reaching implications of a law like this.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think as we want to stand for faith and family in America, this is extremely important part of that stand. Um, as always, Joseph, we always like to give, a fair voice to the other side on this issue and explain, how they see this and how they approach this. And so I'm wondering if you can share with the audience what would the other side say in defense of maybe not having these kinds of safeguards in place?
Oh, I'd love to. I love this section, Grace. It helps me draw on my former law school skills of arguing any alternative. So, again, as you say, the goal of this section of our show is always, hopefully, if someone who thinks differently on an issue than us hears me make this alternative argument, hopefully, after I finish speaking, they would say, yes, that's exactly what I believe. We really want to give them the fairest shake possible and as accurate as possible, the summation, before we talk about what may be wrong with it. So this is how I would summarize a lot of the opposition to this, and I'm being just very high level here for the sake of our show, which is let's take Apple for example. Apple's parental control and child safety features and similar features in other operating systems are already more than enough to effectively protect kids and empower parents. This is ultimately a parent's job to police their kids' online behavior. So, Grace, maybe I'll just start in my first response to this, which is that Apple's safety features are laudable and noble. Unfortunately, they have also been proven to be quite ineffective to protect kids. They don't require parental consent for kids to sign contracts, which is what happens when you download an app. You're signing a contract, and they don't require parental supervision after the age of 12. There are a lot of reasons for this. None of them are good reasons, but they root back to outdated federal law from the late 90s, early 2000s, when the internet was a completely different place. So Apple hides behind that, and with other tech developers. It's not solely Apple's fault. I don't want to beat up on Apple because I think a lot of them really do. A lot of people that work at Apple, particularly lobbyists, really do want to do the right thing. But that's what's happening right now. Is in Apple's current safety features do not require parental supervision after the age of 12. And as we said earlier, app ratings are still self-assigned by the app developers with no accountability. So companies like these big tech companies, they are able to use these third-party age verifiers that we talked about earlier. They can safely verify the age of a user. They simply don't. There's no incentive for them to do that, which is the need for this legislation, this kind of collective action, is they need that push to do the right thing and use this excellent new technology to protect kids.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think, when it comes back to the argument of, oh, parents should police their kids, I think we agree with that, but we need to give them the tools to be able to do that because, not everyone is fully knowledgeable on how all of these things work, and nor do parents necessarily have the time to look into all these different things to understand how to best protect their kids. We have to equip them. And I think that is part of the government's job, and part of our job is to make sure that parents are equipped. And then parents obviously take the steps to implement this and watch over, what their kids are being allowed to. A parent could still just sign off consent for anything. So they still have a role to play and look at, okay, what is this app that you want? Let me have a look at it. Let me decide whether or not I'm going to sign off on it. So there's still a role that parents are playing, a huge role. And they have to deal with, the emotional side of their kids who are like, no, I want this app and whatever, and having to say no, if it's not one that's going to be good for them. So this still involves parents to a huge degree. They're still having to do a lot, and the least we can do is assist them in this. And so I'm sure there's other areas in life where, you even think about when you go and do an activity, you often have to sign a waiver. It just makes you aware of the potential for, you know, um, injury. That's just part of it. And this is kind of the same thing. We're just giving parents this opportunity to understand more clearly what their kids are being exposed to. And that we do that in every other area of life. So why wouldn't we do that here?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I can remember the old school days when I would go into a video game store, and to buy a video game above a certain rating, I would need my mom there to buy it with me, which sounds funny in retrospect. But the point is, that's an in person age verification. What this law requires is simply the online version of that. So, Grace,
Mm.
that's so well said. We completely agree. This is ultimately a parent's job, but parents have a reasonable expectation of their government and the tech companies to partner with them in doing that. And as we explained earlier, the current safeguards, the current parental controls are just not enough. Parents need more. And that's what this does is it finally gives parents the tools to actually exercise their right of directing the upbringing of their children. So well said, Grace. This has been a great show. I want to thank our audience for listening to this episode of House to Home, which is a podcast, again, of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. I've been Joseph Kohm alongside Grace Youngson. We'll be here every week going forward, so you can find the latest episode of House to Home wherever you get your pods. And please connect with FPAF on social media. You'll find our social media handles in the show notes and description. Thank you for listening. We will see you again next week.